B. Driscoll and Professor, Reverend, all the credentials that you have. Happy New Year to you again, sir. And thank you for your patience and thank you for coming on.
Happy New Year to you too, LA, and to the viewers and listeners.
Absolutely. So before I get to your article, which it was well written as always, and speaks to 2022, I wanted to get your thoughts on what the president said. This whole line they want to talk about, they want to praise him on. I was a little, taken aback that he didn't really. I know it was a short time, but he didn't really go after people. He, it was a Trump thing, and now we start seeing, really, to your point about how to win in terms of Democrats, how the strategy is maybe to throw Trump's name in there and his legacy and the chaos that happened a year ago. But what do you think about his speech, and define where we are from when that happened 1 year later?
Yeah, those are most excellent questions, LA. I was actually on a work call when the president and the vice president was speaking, but I will say from the little I did hear, it sounded to me as if he was not mincing words. Biden, I think, declared Trump without actually saying and using his name as an enemy of American democracy, which is, of course, what we already knew. He just actually vocalized it without actually ever mentioning him by name. Mm-hmm. I will say also, from what I did hear, again, I didn't hear all of it, particularly the beginning parts. I don't think the president went far enough in terms of legislation, right? Right. I'm big on policy and legislation and Black folk and people in generally being involved and engaged. He mentioned voter suppression in the states, but he did not, again, I repeat, he did not make a forceful commandment that Congress get rid of the filibuster and pass the Freedom to Vote Act or the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, nor did he mention, or maybe he did, but I may have missed it, but he wasn't forceful enough in mentioning police reform, criminal justice reform. Those are two highlights of this administration that they, quite frankly, promised as campaign promises, and they failed as of yet to deliver on those. And I'm concerned that will lead to a lack of voter fatigue, compassion fatigue when it comes to the midterm. But again, where are we in terms of the 1 year anniversary of the Eugene Goodman anniversary? Because it was a Black man, of course, who saved America. Let's be very clear about that. Right. We're in the same predicament. We're in the same situation. Frankly, I think it's gotten worse. You have individuals, lawmakers, even in my home state of Georgia, who are holding prayer vigils for the insurrectionists, the white supremacists, the rioters who stormed the Capitol. So this divide that we experienced, we continue to experience. And I am not sure, as King said, where we go from here.
But and Professor, really, if you look at it, you wrote an article about white liberalism and white nationalism, I would say. But to your point about bringing up King, remember when he was in jail, he was talking about the dangers of those so-called quote unquote white partners in this struggle,
right? And
how far they would go.
Right.
Like how far? So that's why, and I don't want to get into the debate with Joe Manchin, but I mean, just the whole, how far they're going to go. If the Democrats have a slim margin, but they have a margin, the House and Senate, your president is Democrat, why can't John Lewis bill get passed? Why can't you do something with immigration? Why can't this $15 wage get done? Why are these things? These are all affecting people of color, certainly, poor whites and others. But if you're running it, if Nancy Pelosi's telling people to stand down and do and stuff like that, then that goes back to the great king and what he said. Like, they're going to be liberal to a certain extent.
You're right. King, in his letter to Birmingham jail, said that, in paraphrasing, how disappointed he was with white moderates, right? That it wasn't the White Citizens Council or the Ku Klux Klaner, but it was the white moderate who, is more devoted to order than to justice. And this
Right.
this is what currently, unfortunately, what we're seeing with regard to Senators Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema of Arizona. They're not being forceful enough, and and when I say they, I'm specifically speaking of Majority Leader Charles Schumer,
Right.
the president. They are whole-handing Manchin and Sinema. They're going to have to amend the filibuster if they want voting rights if they're serious about voting rights in this country and criminal justice reform. That's the only way it's going to get accomplished. And the president, in his speech, though I thought, again, from what I heard, was good, but he didn't go far enough in terms of pushing for voting rights and pushing for criminal justice reform.
The things that he ran on.
Right. When both of these issues, I would add, are directly linked to January 6th.
Right.
Because the January 6th on this anniversary is all a part of the big lie, the lie that somehow Trumpers and those of that ilk, this election was stolen. So it's tied, and they want to suppress voting rights across the country and in certain states. In addition, we know, of course, they stormed and rioted the Capitol. Well, that's criminal justice in itself. So you're looking at two legislative issues that this administration and largely this Congress ran on, and on this anniversary, as things have gotten, I would add, increasingly worse, they're not being forceful in terms of forcing the hand of certain members of Congress to ensure that legislation passes.
And that's so disappointing, especially when everybody's focused, Professor, on 2022 Senate, House. Governorships are up for grab. It's a lot of things. And so tell me why, before we get to the way you think they can win, tell me why I call it, and this is my words, cower down. You got some people who are running that want to throw Trump in there, to think that if you throw Trump in there, you're going to get the votes and you win. But they're not pushing forward. If Republicans are not working with you, if Republicans are doing these different things, and even if you have some Democrats that are not doing what, speak up and speak out. So why are they not doing that, knowing you got a slim margin, knowing how the polls look? And Democrats are poll crazy. They look at them polls and they go crazy. Why are they not doing that?
As I said, and this kind of gets to the heart of my article here, Democrats long have a problem with messaging. But the problem, I think, with the Democratic Party, generally speaking, is that they are more so, which is not necessarily a problem. It becomes a problem when it gets to governing. They're more so concerned about the effect of the whole. Republicans do a very good job on looking at the individual. Democrats do a very good job of looking at the whole. So what Democrats now have to do is pay attention to the individual and start messaging to the individuals and to specific communities, and specifically to the base of the party that has gotten them elected, and frankly, that continues to keep them elected. And who is that? That is largely the African-American community, and that's largely other communities of color, and the few liberal rights that exist in certain blue states, New York and California and the like. So they need to start talking individually to those specific groups about how these policies benefit them. But again, to this conversation, what they continue to do is kowtow to those moderates within the party, trying to be this sort of big tent party, which unfortunately, we have moved past the days where you had liberal Republicans and conservative Democrats.
And real quick too, just to follow up with that to you, Professor, because I mentioned this with another guest, and I mentioned this to you. You know, the moderates are doing this doom and gloom thing. We don't do this, and the liberals and the extreme liberals are gonna hurt this. White middle class white middle America white is not coming back to the Democrats. Those coal miners and they're not coming back. Like they're not coming back. So why do these moderates, other than maybe some agenda, think that they can try to attract them? They're not. They have long gone, in my opinion, and just looking at some numbers from there. Just stop with the Ohio and those rural areas in Ohio and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. They're not coming back. They're not. So why do they do that?
Because the Democrats haven't realized that. They still think that they can find a needle in a haystack. They still think that the Democratic Leadership Council under Clinton, they still think that those moderates and those suburbanites still exist. Most white independents in this country lean center right, if anything. The era of the Reagan Democrat is over. There is no such thing as a Reagan Democrat anymore. So to your point, white working class has been lost to the Republican Party. And the moment the Democrats truly realize that, I think the better off they will be. But again, I will say, I think it's an unfortunate reality that, to your point, to this conversation, white working class Rust Belt has been permanently lost. But in the Democratic mindset, particularly in the party establishment, they still think they can win them over.
And I just think then I can sell you the Brooklyn Bridge. If that's what you believe, then I'm going to make some money off you on the Brooklyn Bridge. I'm going to sell you it, and you're going to buy it, because that's what you're thinking. If just joining us, we're talking with Professor Driscoll here on the Batchelor News Radio Show. So, Professor, you had a very good article, and it talks about Democrats can win in 2022. Here's how. Before you get to the strategy on it, if from a Democratic standpoint, what type of Democrat do you want to win? Because that's what we're talking about. You just talking about the moderates and you got the ALC in New York and all the progressives and the Bernie Sanders and all those type of people there on one side, and you got the moderates and then you got the Joe Mancins and stuff like that. So if you're going to win, because they won the strategy to win, but you got three different type of Democrats fighting the whole time, then how does that work? Does that even work?
LA, you actually raise a very poignant question, one to which I have not actually thought about in terms of what type of Democrat one needs to win. Generally, I think that the Democrats that need to win are those who understand that you have to be progressive, that you have to help to move this country truly forward, not socialism, one of the talking points of the Republican Party, but you truly have to be progressive in terms of helping to move the country forward, while not necessarily alienating those who are center right or flat out Republicans, but wanting to work with them. So you need Democrats who are not like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. But you need Democrats like Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock. You need Democrats who understand where the country is and where the country is trying to go, and who are trying to put forth sensible, logical, reasonable legislation and policy that helps the less than, that helps the least of these. That's the type of Democrat you need. Those who are going to continue to advocate for child poverty, those who are going to continue to look at infrastructure in this country, those who are going to continue to pay attention to small businesses, those who are going to continue to pay attention to the issue of voting rights and criminal justice reform in our country, those who are going to continue to look at a comprehensive approach to immigration, those who are going to continue to look at how do we ensure that companies like Meta, Facebook, and other social medias are regulated safely. You need Democrats like that.
But here's the thing. Here's the playing advocate here. So if you get the good senator from Georgia who you mentioned in your home state, that takes on, maybe not necessarily right now at least, the leadership, but the mindset of the party, and you have the nationalism and the moderates, right? And Republicans who are very good at painting this doom and gloom and the boogeyman is coming type thing. Then again, how do you even sustain that? Because even if it's an election in 2022 and Warlock, that mindset wins, you still have the mansions and all these old school guys. You still have the other side that's going to do the doom and gloom, and they're coming to just take your guns and all that kind of stuff. How do you sustain that?
Yeah, there has to be this intergenerational conversation amongst Democrats, because to your point, you have the establishment Democrats which is pretty much leadership. So Steny Hoyer from Maryland, Nancy Pelosi, James Clyburn from South Carolina. But then you have sort of these young guns like Hakeem Jeffries and AOC and Cori Bush out of Missouri. And there seems to be this clash, right? This intergenerational, multi-generational clash within our country, largely speaking, but within the Democratic Party specifically, about certain ideas and progress. And to the earlier conversation, it is specifically those more established Democrats, those old guard Democrats who feel as though that the Reagan Democrat is somehow still alive, that they can win the Rust Belt white working class of America. But then you have those like a Cori Bush, an AOC, who are on the more progressive side, who are really fighting for table kitchen issues that people go through every day trying to make ends meet. There has to be a conversation, and what that conversation looks like is ensuring that you have people like AOC and Cori Bush within leadership, because clearly they are not. And right. So what's happening is that AOCs and the Cori Bushes of the world and the Ilhan Omars of the world, they're having to push the agenda and go often to extreme tactics to get the attention of the establishment Democrats. If you make those more progressive, younger Democrats a part of the leadership, whether it is within the Democratic National Committee, whether it is with Congress or at the state level, then I believe you begin to forge that divide within the current Democratic Party.
Let me ask you this real quick, because I want to make sure that people can find your article and read it. Very good strategy. Talk about the strategy in winning, number one. And then, but number two, what you said is pretty profound, because if the leadership is Nancy Pelosi, stand down, we're not going to go after Bush and all that, and let Trump whatever and ride off, and you got Biden, who I've said, Biden, he's shaking hands with the enemy, and I don't mean that in a light way. I mean, he talks so much about how he worked with everybody, even those that were not in the best interest of people of color. And so you got all those different things going on. So if you have the minority leadership of an AOC or a Warlock or somebody like that has a progressive, helping people agenda, and you have these moderates, then at the end of the day, when you look at what they're doing, it's really not one of those things where the Democrats are putting themselves in a position to tell the story. And they don't tell the story. I've read articles today, Professor, that Stacey Abrams in your own state stole votes. Now she got her election stolen, in my opinion. Now they say, argue, in one of those conservative groups, she stole votes to help Warlock get elected and all this stuff. I mean, so there's a place where they're arguing, people argue, I get it, and you got to figure that out. But there's a narrative out there that Democrats are not taking advantage of or even talking about. Like they're just not doing anything. It's almost like 2022. They just, it's a done deal. We're going to win. So they don't have to work. And meanwhile, the other side is playing chess. They playing checkers. Republicans are playing chess. So what say you about those things you can do to win, and then those things when you see and hear and look at and read about where they're just not engaged at all? I mean, I don't even know another word, Professor, that they're not engaged. They're not engaged at all.
No, you're absolutely right. Democrats are not engaged. One of the reasons what made Stacey Abrams, I think, so prolific in her race as a Black woman in a state like Georgia against Brian Kemp, who frankly stole the election, was that she was engaged. She was engaged with rural and poor communities in Georgia. She was engaged with the Hispanic and Latino community in Georgia. She was engaged with Black communities in Georgia. So she was engaged. I think her campaign, which is why people are excited about her race again at running for the gubernatorial race in Georgia, is because she actually was engaged. I think she's a model for a lot of Democrats to follow. Democrats have a messaging problem, and they always have, and Republicans have always played chess, right? There are three specific pieces of legislation that the Democrats could very well tout about what they have done and how it directly impacts the average American. The child tax credit alone, which of course has ensured upwards to $3,600 for each child. I mean, that you're talking about raising a child out of poverty. Well, the child tax credit alone is one. The Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act that was passed, making much needed improvement to marginalized communities, particularly around the access of broadband, which we know was an issue, particularly during the heart of the pandemic, was a win. Democrats aren't communicating that. And they're not communicating about how things like the Investment in the Jobs Act and the child tax credit affects your child, how it affects your household. And in order to communicate that, you have to be engaged with communities. And again, Democrats are not. And that is the problem. That is how they could win. So perhaps the title of my article is a bit hyperbolic because they're not doing those things. And if they were doing those things, they would be on a path forward. You and I both see how Republicans have communicated and changed the narrative about critical race theory, how they have changed the narrative about laws, how they have changed the narrative about the president's Build Back Better plan, and they just label it socialism, right? Republicans do a very good job at messaging to their constituency. They do a very good job of changing and spinning the narrative to fit their constituents. Democrats need to do the same thing, but the reality is Democrats don't have to necessarily spin, because sometimes the policies that they enact actually do benefit the American people. They just do a very poor job of communicating how it directly and individually affects the American people, their children, and their families.
The one thing I respect, I got my next guest on the line, Professor. That the one thing I respect about you is that Republican and Democrat, from where you were and where you are and where you are now, is that you are all about the black. Like you understand the concerns and the plight of what's going on, and not only that, you have a strategy. So my last question, and I know my guests on the line, Hoove and T, but my last question to you is sort of twofold. So number one, if that's where you are in terms of making sure that we have an understanding and awareness of the blackness, if your strategy, and I want to make sure that people can find your article and talk about the strategy. The strategy is definitely to win Democrats. Then if that's the case, what part of that is about helping people of color? Because I'm not anti anything, but I look like you, right? So we, so that's what it's about. So what is the strategy to pull people? I mean, this whole notion, this bill that's not being passed in terms of police brutality and $15 is not a lot of money. $15 an hour is not a lot of money, man. And we can't get that passed. So what are we doing? What are you doing? What do you want them to do in the strategy of helping people of color specifically right now, right? To get people elected that are going to help those agendas.
Yeah, right. Very simply, LA, it's about engagement. Every Democratic operative, strategist, politician, they need to stay on message and communicate about, to your point, how this Build Back Better plan, which will invest $3 billion in capital access to small employers, entrepreneurs, small business owners, which are largely people of color, right? How it's going to diversify and create equity within small business investment companies, how it's going to ensure access to Medicare coverage, which affects my grandmother, right? So all of these things in the Build Back Better program specifically, that they can communicate, and they have to do that in order to communicate, they have to be engaged, and that's what they're not doing. So it boils down simply to engagement with various communities, particularly Black and brown people and poor people in this country, and communicating how those wins or the legislation is going to help them. Because so often in Washington, we talk in these very circular, in the clouds at a very high level. Not dumb it down, but bring that down to where people can understand how this will help me. Republicans, again, do a very good job at that, right? And I think the only saving grace that Republicans might have is the Supreme Court ruling come July of this year with regard to abortion per the Mississippi law. I think that if the Supreme Court of the United States is going to overturn Roe v. Wade, I think then we will see perhaps a massive ground swelling of people going to the polls that would ultimately, I think, save Democrats. But that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I hate to be the half glass full guy and the pessimistic guy. I mean, but I grew up in Connecticut, Professor, as you know, and Tino, and they kill babies in the suburbs of Connecticut. You killing babies with the guns, and that didn't change. So we'll see. I mean, that's.
Well, you raise a very good point, and they were white babies that they killed.
Right. I mean, really, and babies are bad. I love kids have nothing to do with it. So I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, if they didn't change it for the suburbs of Connecticut, man, then what we doing with all this other stuff? I think that's really what it. Real quick, where can people find the article so they can pull it up and see the strategies that you're talking about?
Sure. So the title of the article is Democrats Can Win in 2022. Here's how. You can follow me Twitter at Q_Driscoll4.
Professor, listen, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate your insight and your wisdom. And I know, like I said, on the spiritual side too. Thank you so much. You be safe. I will talk with you next week. Again, Happy New Year to you. And thanks for coming on.
Same to you, LA.
Yes, sir.
Take
Yes,
care.
sir.
Bye-bye.
First things first, I pop freaks all the honeys, dummies, playboy bunnies, those wanting money. Those the ones I like, cause they don't get Nathan but penetration. Unless it smells like sanitation. Garbage, I turn like doorknobs. Heart throb never, black and ugly as ever. However, I stay Gucci down to the socks. Rings and watch filled with and my jam knocked in the Mitsubishi. Girls pee-pee when they see me, never will creep me and they as I lay down laws like Island Coppet. Stop it, if you think they're gonna make a profit. Don't see my ones, don't see my get it? Now tell your friends Papa hit it, then split it in two as I flow with the Junior Mafia. I don't know what the hell's stopping ya. I'm clocking ya, Versace shade watching ya. Once you grin, I'm in, game begin. First I talk about how I dress is this and diamond necklaces, stretch Lexuses. Just immaculate from the back, I get deeper and deeper. Help you reach the climax that your man can't make. Call him, tell him you be home real late and send the break. I got that good love, girl, you didn't know. I got that good love, girl, you didn't know. That song on how it's so long. Thought he worked his until I handled my biz. There I is, major pain like Damon Wayans. Low down dirty even like his brother Keenan scheming. Don't leave your girl around me, true player for real. Act Puff Dad D. You ringing bells with bags from Chanel. Baby Ben's traded in your Hyundai XL. Fully equipped CD changer with the cell. She beat me at 12. Where you at? Ripping job paying car notes. While I'm swimming in your women like the stroke. Right stroke, left stroke was the best stroke. Death stroke, all down. Nothing left to do but send her home to you. I'm through. Can you sing the song for me, boo? I got that good love, girl, you didn't know. I got that good love, girl, you didn't know. Me. We can cruise the world with pearls, gator boots for girls. The envy of all women, crushed linen, Cartier wristwear with diamonds in it. The finest women I love with the passion. Your man's a wimp, I get at a good thrashing. High fashion, flying in the all states. To me, while your man. Isn't this great? Your flight leaves at 8, my flight lands at 9, my game just rewinds. Lyrically, I'm supposed to represent. I'm not only a client, I'm the player president. I got that good love, girl, you didn't know. I got that good love, girl, you didn't know.
Welcome to another edition of the Batchelor News Radio Show. Thank you for joining us. And we appreciate you being a part of this. You could have been doing anything else, and you decided to be a part of this broadcast, the Batchelor News Radio Show on Big Mind Entertainment. Of course, YouTube, if you're watching it there. And, of course, you can listen to the audio of the thebatchelornews.airtime.pro. I want to bring in my guests, of course, AFC Roundup and Nashville Voice and Sports Awakening, and he's got a 27 job. He is Mike Patton. Mike, I appreciate you, man. Happy New Year once again, sir.
Thank you for coming, for allowing me to come on again, and Happy New Year to you and everyone listening as well.
Absolutely. Man, a lot has happened since the last time we had you on. Let's start with the NFL. Right in your backyard, Tennessee Titans. Big scheme, the big picture of it. Are you surprised that they got the number one seed, the home field in the AFC?
Honestly, I'm not. I can't say I'm terribly surprised, but I am in some aspects as well. For a team to not really have the great production out of Julio Jones, not really have AJ Brown, the entire season healthy, and then also to be without Derrick Henry since week 9 and still find a way to get the number one seed and win ball games, that's definitely an amazing feat. And it's, to be honest, it's kind of worthy of Mike Vrabel being coach of the year, in my opinion.
Yeah, really, people wrote them off once Henry went down and they struggled a bit, winning games, but they regrouped. The offensive line continued to run the ball. Whoever, helped the run and whoever was back there ran the ball well. Defense played well, especially up front. And Tannehill did some good things. Struggled a little bit against the Texans, but that was to be expected. Texans trying to go out the right way, and certainly, a divisional game. So I wasn't really surprised in that regard. But the Colts, man, staying in the South. Listen, if you had told me, and T-Mac's up here, that the Steelers would win their last two, the Colts would lose the way they did the last two, and the Steelers get in because the Colts lose to Jacksonville. I know they don't play well in Jacksonville. It was all documented. I get that. But the way they went out, was very surprising. Carson Wentz wasn't. I've been saying this about Carson Wentz. This dude is peanut butter sandwich. You don't give him a running game. The defense doesn't play well. You put it on his arm, peanut butter sandwich. He's gonna choke. And so I wasn't surprised that he played the way he played. But were you surprised how they had a meltdown? Because the interesting part of it, Mike, is for my Steelers, they needed the Colts to lose and the Raiders and Chargers not tie. The Raiders and Chargers almost tied. That was more of a reality than the Colts losing. But were you surprised at the Colts meltdown?
Honestly, I was a little surprised. The first game, I have a few friends that are actually Colts fans, and I mentioned to them about the actual Raiders game previous week. I'm like, okay, they might could lose this game. The Raiders could potentially win this. Oh no, we're gonna win this. We got this. Lost it. Going to Jacksonville. Oh, we got that. We're gonna win and get in the playoffs. I'm like, okay, they must have forgot they hadn't won there since 2014. And it was amazing to see the breakdown that happened. You wouldn't think the Jaguars, who, by the way, fans organized a clown suit protest against the team, showing up in clown suits at the game. Right. And and I guess it was enough to motivate them to actually win the game because they just dominated on both sides of the ball. Trevor Lawrence did whatever he wanted to. And they really didn't have a dominant running game, and they won that game against the Colts, which it was amazing. I didn't expect it. Honestly, it's almost like the Colts never even traveled to Jacksonville.
Yeah, that was a shocking result. Speaking of the Raiders Chargers, if anybody, I know he's only been there in a short period of time. But anybody needs to be fired. Is the Chargers coach. He's done stupid stuff all year, going for it on your 18 or whatever it was yesterday in that game. And then Raiders, Chargers did us a favor. Forget about Jacksonville. But the Chargers did us a favor because the Raiders look like we'll just take the tie. We're both going to get in. We'll get in. They'll get in. All is well. We'll play next week. He calls timeout to allow the Raiders to kick a field goal. Thank you, Mr. Staley, for the Chargers. Pittsburgh says, thank you very much. But what about that call? What about this whole notion of, the analytics and going for it? We've seen John Harbaugh make it famous, and it cost them their season. Going for it and all those type of things, but going for it on fourth down, going for it on the 18. What about the Chargers coach making these decisions and costing them the game, and the overall picture of these coaches taking these chances based on these geeky numbers, I call?
Well, honestly, you missed the most popular guy that does this, and that's Frank Reich. So honestly, all three of the coaches that really do this a lot, which is John Harbaugh, Staley out in Los Angeles, and then Wright, they're all out of the playoffs. So that's what you get for listening to numbers. Play the stats, play the statistics. I understand that part of it. Sometimes you do have to go for it, but come on now. Some of these analytics are not going to win you games because some of these guys giving you analytics have never put on shoulder pads a day in their life. Right. So I like Staley. In some instances, I liked him more as a defensive coordinator for the Rams last year because he definitely was. I mean, honestly, I think he was better than Raheem Morris has been this year. But I'll say that as a head coach, he's got a lot to learn. Now, do I think he deserves firing after 1 year? No. But I don't think any coach really deserves that unless they just bomb incredibly bad. I mean, I don't even think Steve Wilkes deserved that when he got fired at Arizona after 1 year. But he definitely cost his team. That is for sure. He cost his team.
Talking with Mike Patton here on the Batchelor News Radio Show on the Batchelor News Radio Network. Mike, before I go bring T in, you talked about, Coach of the Year and in terms of Vrabel. I've been very tough on Tomlin for a long time. Mm-hmm. The way he allowed AB do what he did and finally got rid of – he didn't really get rid of AB until AB, went after Roethlisberger, threw the football at him and that kind of thing. Then he was gone. And then allowing Roethlisberger in a lot of ways to kind of run the ship as well. But they have no business being in the playoffs with that offense. The running, the defense getting gashed week after week, all the injuries and the different things. Roethlisberger can't throw the ball more than 5 yards down the field, and they're in the playoffs. So when you look at what he's done and look at Vrabel and some others, who would you say is the coach of the year this year?
Now, I will say this, though. One thing about Roethlisberger, that actually, letting him do what he wanted to do, that was more from the GM than Tomlin. He was actually in a no-win situation. But I would say that, as far as Tomlin, I enjoy watching him coach. The man has never had a losing season on the sidelines. There's got to be something to be said about that. So, I give him his respect there. But I don't think he's in the running for Coach of the Year. I would have said Brian Flores was, but it was like, wow, I'm still shocked he got fired.
That's just crazy. They should have
it's insane. That's insane. But, hey, he's fired, but, Matt Rule and Joe Judge still have jobs.
Right.
Go figure. Then, I'll say Belichick is in there in some aspects just because, nobody expected the Patriots to make the playoffs this year. Vrabel, of course, is in there. And I mean, you got to put the coach from you got to put the Green Bay coach in there, Matt LaFleur.
Matt LaFleur, yeah.
I'm trying to think of who else you could put in there for that one, but
I don't know about Belichick because I expected. Well, I mean, I expected them to make the playoffs. I mean, I thought, especially when how Mac Jones played to start the year, that defense, and they could run the ball. they run into tight ends and stuff. I expected them to make the play. I didn't expect them to win the division. I thought Buffalo would, but I thought that New England would make the playoffs. But you were saying.
Yeah, honestly, I didn't expect them to make the playoffs, especially with going the rookie quarterback to start. I didn't put the odds for them to win it, but hey, it happened. He put himself up there. And a lot of people actually want to vote him coach of the year, and I'm like, I can't see it. I mean, honestly, looking at Vrabel, he's used 90 to, or I think he's used 90 players this year. That's an NFL record. You lose your top running back, you lose your top receivers for a good portion of the season, and you still win the division. You still get the number 1 seed. I mean, honestly, I think he's made a great case for him to be the coach of the year this year. I mean, look at the pieces they lost defensively for pieces of the season too. Bud Dupree for some of the season. You didn't lose Jeff Simmons. He's been there. But you lost like pretty much majority of your inside linebackers, and Rashawn Evans, Jayon Brown. I mean, David Long was gone. They were actually going with a rookie this year at some points for like 3 or 4 games and still winning games.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. Real quick, speaking of King Henry, is he coming back to play once they find out who they're playing? He will be back.
Oh, he actually was back at practice last week.
Right.
So they didn't want to activate him, of course, for that game. But he was back at practice last week. He actually did not look like he had any kind of limp or anything like that at all. He was running, doing what he usually does. And he's actually been working out individually for about a week or two out there, quiet as it's kept.
Okay.
But with the trainers and things like that. So yeah, he will be back. And that's why it's a big thing that the Titans got home field advantage, because as Teron Davenport on ESPN, he pointed out one good thing about being at home. They have grass on the field in Tennessee instead of turf. Turf would probably tear your foot up a little bit more, or is not as much to give in terms. It doesn't give as much with your foot. Grass definitely gives more with your foot. So definitely advantage Titans when it comes to that, and definitely advantage Derrick Henry.
Talking with Mike Patton. I'm bringing Tony T-Mac McClain, of course, from BAS and Newsroom. T, good to see you. Questions for Mike?
I halfway agree with you. I thought the guy who got fired today should have got Coach of the Year.
Flores. Yeah.
He's definitely a candidate, and I definitely don't. I'm definitely shaking my head at the Dolphins, but the people are saying that Harbaugh, but actually Harbaugh's not actually one of the candidates, which is funny.
Yeah. Well, and to be honest, I don't think Harbaugh would go there. I think he'd probably wind up going
to Chicago.
Maybe Chicago. I wouldn't be surprised if the Giants come to their senses and fire Judge Judy and bring him in there.
Oh man, the voice court lawyer is better than him.
Yeah. Well, I think she'd at least would throw on 3rd and 9.
I just don't understand how you allow the GM to retire, and you let Joe Judge stay as the coach, and he has a meeting with the team. I'm like, come on, the team doesn't want him back, yet you're going to keep him there, and you're going to keep Daniel Jones. I mean, come on now, what is going on?
The Giants are back in 1974 right about now.
Well, whatever time zone they're in or time period they're in, they're positively stinking it up.
Yeah, I can smell it from here.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just don't understand. Just to the both of you, start with you, Mike. When you look at the landscape of the AFC, let's start with them first. I still say Chiefs are, they're the standard. They are the AFC champs from last year. Won the Super Bowl the year before that, and they still got that bad man, number 15. I'm very concerned. I don't want to say Ryan Tannehill is Carson Wentz, but thank God King Henry's coming back, because you don't want Tannehill, leading the charge to get you to the Super Bowl. So thank God he's coming back. But when you look at the AFC overall, the Bengals are the glamour pick now with Chase and Burrow and how they're playing. And again, I mentioned the Chiefs, but who do you think is the favorite in the AFC? Start with you, Mike.
Well, of course, the favorite is the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, ever since they've acquired Melvin Ingram from your Pittsburgh Steelers, by the way, they've only lost one game, one, and their defense has been very, very solid. I mean, honestly, it's like Melvin Ingram fit perfectly for what they needed and allowed them to put Chris Jones back inside at the defensive tackle position.
And real quick to your point about that, that defense. The silver lining in that loss to Cincinnati is they went after Burrow. I mean, I think they had 4 sacks in that game. I don't know why they played press with Chase. He was killing you all day. You got to have a safety over the top. They kept playing man okay. Burrow said, all right, you're going to play man. I'm just going to go. My guy's going to beat your guy. And they could, stubborn, didn't come out of it. But anyway, to your point in terms of their defense has been playing really well.
Yeah, definitely. Also, what I can say is about that game, you notice that the Chiefs were actually trying to stop the run just a little bit more. And because of that, they exposed their secondaries, mainly their corners. And I'll say this, if the Chiefs do that and come up against the run against the Titans that same way, with the way Julio Jones played this past weekend, he looked like he was catching a rhythm and a groove with Ryan Tannehill. Probably his best game of the season.
Right.
At the right time of the season, which I've been telling Titans fans the entire year. You don't need him to be outstanding during the season. You need Julio to be outstanding when it comes playoff time. Because if him and AJ Brown get going, he's fine now. He's actually fine now. You actually saw him a couple times where Tannehill missed him deep, and he had ran past the Houston defenders.
Right.
He was going for a touchdown. Just him and Tannehill don't have necessarily the greatest rhythm, just because he's been in and out of the lineup. But the good thing is, last couple of weeks, both of them have had a chance to practice with each other and get their rhythm down. So, but I would say my favorite definitely is still the Kansas City Chiefs, even though they don't have home field advantage. But it is what it is. They still are the champs of the AFC.
T in the AFC.
Did the champs do you beat them? Although I think if you get a Titans Chiefs AFC final, you got to lean toward the Titans strictly because they're at home.
Well, I'll say this though, just to kind of cut. I didn't mean to cut you off, but the last 2 times the Titans have had home field advantage in the playoffs,
got beat.
They have lost the first game, and the team that they lost to is not in it. I would say it was just Baltimore Ravens. That's Baltimore Ravens both times. But that's an ominous thing there as well. They're going to have to exercise those demons also. So, but I will say this though, definitely, one thing I do look at is, you remember a couple of years ago when the Titans made an impromptu run to the AFC Championship when they had to face the Chiefs, and they were up a little bit early, and then all of a sudden Patrick Mahomes made that run, and then all of a sudden the whole tide and momentum swung. You got to also remember the Titans defense is not as bad as it was then. They didn't have a pass rusher in that game. They didn't really have great cornerback play. So, I mean, you look at the guys they have now. They have Jeffrey Simmons, and they got, I cannot remember his name, but he's had a great year playing right next to Jeffrey Simmons inside. And then you've got Bud Dupree coming off one side, and Harold Landry, who is their sack leader, coming off the other side. So, being honest, if they play the Titans again, that's why I'm going for I think the Titans can win, because the Titans defense is definitely better.
Well, if it's a showdown and it's neutral, again, if it comes down to those 2 teams and the Chiefs neutralize the running game,
all bets are off.
Yeah, I mean,
that's true.
He's not gonna match Pat Mahomes. Mahomes gonna get
it
done.
The one thing you got to have that they have going for them, the fact that they were able to sustain and also get home field without King Henry, that has to do a lot for their psyche. Now, look, they've been on the verge for let's say, the last 3 years now. And at some, no disrespect to the Chiefs. Chiefs clearly have been the best team in the AFC the last, 2 to 3 years. But the thing is, the AFC is getting more top heavy now. You see the Bengals are turning, you see where the Bengals are going. Even as lousy as they looked last night, I think that there's, the Raiders are going to be somebody you're going to have to deal with down the road, strictly because of their defense. So if Tennessee is going to win it, they better win it this year, because the rest of the AFC is starting to load up, and you get that 3 to 5 year window to win, and if you don't take advantage of it, you become the Utah Jazz, for lack of a better word.
Right. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say also, one thing we didn't mention as well, which I did have to mention and commend the Titans for. They went and picked up a guy that I thought they would pick up, and Deontay Foreman. He had over 500 yards rushing, actually replacing Derrick Henry, and he didn't start the first couple games after Henry was gone. He just was brought on the roster with Adrian Peterson, because I knew they were picking up Adrian Peterson. But I kept telling people they're going to pick up Deontay Foreman because he's familiar with the system, and people thought I was crazy. And then lo and behold, who they pick up?
Yeah, well, Pittsburgh's very familiar with Deontay Foreman and a few other running backs. But anyway, I'm talking with Mike Patton and Tony McLean on the Batchelor News radio show. All right, Mike, going to the NFC. Listen, Green Bay home field. I've seen this movie before, though. Mm-hmm. As great as Aaron Rodgers is, I think outside of Dan Marino, I mean, nobody throws the ball like him. And, obviously Hall of Famer. But I've seen this movie before, peanut butter sandwich. So I'm not sold on Green Bay getting to the Super Bowl because they got home field. Dallas has been, they can light it up. But, if they don't get turnovers on defense, they don't really play that well. And, Dak has been missing a lot of passes and wide open guys and stuff, guys dropping balls. I don't know about the NFC as well, but what say you in terms of who you think will win the conference?
I'll say this, the Cowboys might not make it out of the first game.
Right.
They do play the San Francisco 49ers. And the 49ers, I honestly, the kryptonite for the 49ers has always been Jimmy G, and if they get behind early in the game. This game, they got behind 17-0 against one of the best teams in the NFC, and they put up points over and over and over again. And honestly, Jimmy G, I will say this, he had his bad moments in that game for sure. Like throwing that interception right near the goal line to Jalen Ramsey. But he shook it off. He drove them down the field and threw a touchdown to Tennessee, Middle Tennessee's own Jawan Jennings, which he went to Tennessee, but he's from Murfreesboro, which is about 20 minutes. But it just I don't think they make it out the first weekend. I think Green Bay is definitely a formidable team, but if I have to pick a dark horse to make it out, and I'm not being biased, I don't want people to tell me that. I think the 49ers could make some noise in the playoffs. I think it's going to be an NFC West team potentially come out of the NFC. Either the Rams or potentially the dark horse be the 49ers.
Before you answer, I picked the Rams all year, but Matthew Stafford scares the living crap out of me. 2 interceptions like the last 3 games. He's had like 8 interceptions in 4 games, something like that. Not only that, the defense their defense is the football version of the Splash Brothers. They got a bunch of guys who can make plays, right? But they're not physical. They're very. I'm starting to go away from them and maybe go the route of the 49ers. They're physical. They run the ball. Debo is amazing. Jimmy G is again the
he's shaky,
right?
Yeah, he's shaky.
But the Rams they're not.
Can I tell you about the Rams?
Go ahead.
Okay, about the Rams, the one thing I noticed about them is, of course, they do have. I mean, Reader at the linebacker has been playing really well for them.
Right.
I have to give them credit there. But outside of Von Miller, you got and who doesn't make plays as much as I think he could make plays,
I
but
think
that's
he's
another
still
story.
hurt. I think he's still hurt, to be quite
Yeah,
honest.
something's going on. He
Mhm.
just doesn't look the same.
Aaron
Then
Donald,
you got
Ramsey.
Aaron Donald, Ramsey. Outside of those guys, you got to also think they're filling in with a bunch of guys, either draft picks or free agents or things like that. The talent level is not spread evenly on that defense, and I think that's the biggest issue. And plus,
Staley's
you
gone
got to
too. I think hurts them too.
yeah, Staley really hurts with them not being on
Mhm.
because he put Jalen Ramsey in great positions to make a lot of plays. And you notice
Right.
this year he's made plays, but he hasn't made as many plays as he usually would make.
The
So
scary thing with the Rams is at some point in the playoffs, Matthew Stafford has to win the game by himself.
right.
I just as I you know I'll use another Judge Judy reference. I just assume hand it over to her before I hand it over to Stafford at this point, especially in the postseason. It's just I just don't see it. The scary thing about the Niners is would it be a bit of a stretch that as a team defense they may be the best team going into the playoffs in the NFC? As a team, they don't have a lot of big names, but as a team, their defense seems to be peaking at the right point right now. I mean, yesterday, they gave up to 17 early, but the fact that they shut them down and again, we all know that Garofalo, you have to sort of look and peek at times, but Debo Samuels is a beast. I mean,
And Sean
I
McVay
saw him
scares me
play
as well.
live. Woo.
yeah.
Sean McVay, I think, ever since that Super Bowl, I just don't like some of the decisions he makes in his games. Everybody, the 49ers beat the Rams all the time. I get it, but you can't blow a lead like that. You can't blow a lead when you know you got to win at least to secure.
Guys,
if Arizona wins, and you lose the division.
Aren't Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay basically the same guy?
In a sense, the only difference, they pretty much run a boatload of motion to run the same plays like 5, 6, 7 times. They literally but the only difference is that they actually if they had Robert Woods out there for the Rams, then that would be what he'd be doing the same things Debo's doing, except for he's just not as physical.
The game that we haven't mentioned, or the two teams we haven't mentioned, they're actually playing is the Eagles and Tampa. And the Eagles run the ball as good, if not better in some cases, better than the 49ers. They run the football. They've been doing it all year. I think Jalen's been playing a lot better. The interesting thing with Tampa, guys, is I already see where they're going. He's Mike Evans is hurt. They don't have the receivers. They get, I guess Fournette comes back, and that's his safety blanket being Brady. But I looked at them trying to use their tight ends a lot in the playoffs. They're gonna go double tight. They're gonna be throwing the ball. You saw what they did with Gronkowski.
If they can keep Gronkowski upright for more than 2 hours, they got a shot. But
they got 3 tight ends.
Right.
Yeah. But let's face it, Gronk's his guy. That's he's what Jay Novacek was to
Troy Aikman.
That's O.J. Howard too. And they got like 3 tight ends they can use in their scheme. But that's gonna be interesting because it's gonna be this running game that's really good against a very good defensive team that stops the run. Whoever wins that battle wins. But is Tampa, Mike, a dark horse because of Brady to get back there? Hopefully not. But
I'll say this: they won't be a dark horse because of Brady. If they're a dark horse, it'd be because that defense steps up. Because honestly, they haven't been the same defense since they were last year.
Right.
You had they've had a lot of injuries. I'll say with their secondary linebackers. White's been there playing, but the vet back there, he hadn't been playing. He's been injured a lot. So, and then plus Shaq Barrett's hurt too. So, they haven't been the same defensively. If they're able to turn it up defensively, I give them a better shot because honestly, looking at their offense, I mean, you got Mike Evans injured. You got Godwin's out for the year. Antonio Brown, we know he ain't there. You got who else you got? You got Cyril Grayson, who was a guy that ran track at LSU, and now
Right.
he's
Didn't even
lining up
play
a wide
football.
receiver.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you have Scotty Miller. I mean, the list goes on, but I mean, none of those guys are guys you can be like, okay, cool, make me a play. None of them are. So honestly, their defense is going to have to be better than their offense for them to make a run. And also, I forgot to mention too, Tampa Bay also is very good against the run.
Right.
So I'm not sure if Philly's going to have to change that game plan up, or they're going to have to say, hey, we're going to run the football, you stop it. I don't know. We'll see.
I think they're going to run the ball and you stop it. I think they're not going to cut that. Philly and the 49ers know who they are. They do. Phil's going to run the football. Now, if they get behind, 17-0 or something, then they're going to have to make the adjustments. But if they don't, they're going to run the football. That's what they do. A little play action with Jalen, roll them outside, that kind of thing, and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing we're not talking about, guys, that can affect all of this is COVID. If a team, Tennessee or Green Bay, 2 days before the game, they get 10 of their starters out, then that could change everything.
And the fact
the ultimate wild card,
and the fact that they're spreading out this first round so they can get in a Monday game, because you got 2 games Saturday, 3 games Sunday, and then the one Monday night game. A lot can happen between now and then. And remember, they've already got contingency plans for the Super Bowl. They've already asked Jerry Jones about using his place. Apparently, the Rose Bowl is still on standby. They may LA. They may even be coming to the Coscob Dome, just in case.
Exactly. It's that X factor that if the only thing stop King Henry is COVID. The way he runs the football, that kind of thing. Player of the year, Mike, number 1, who's MVP? And what's your thought on this writer who said he wouldn't vote for Aaron Rodgers because he's a bad person and Aaron called him a bum and all this kind of stuff? Now, here's the part of it. And Tony knows this. Baseball writers do this all the time. I don't like the guy, so I'm not going to vote for the guy. But who do you think wins the MVP? And do you think that's a fair assessment, putting character into your decision?
Honestly, I think that more than likely Aaron Rodgers wins it. I was rooting for Jonathan Taylor, but you can't necessarily give him the MVP and he's sitting at home not making the playoffs. So that kind of ruined his candidacy right there. So I'll say Aaron Rodgers is going to win it more than likely. As far as the writer that said he wasn't going to vote on them because he's a jerk and all those type of things, I'm like, look, your job is to vote for the MVP. Your job is not to put your personal feelings in it. Secondly, you're not supposed to say all that stuff out loud anyway. You're supposed to keep that to yourself. Because if you start doing that, you're doing the same exact thing that the baseball writers are doing, not voting on somebody because, he didn't grant me that interview, or he didn't do this, or any of that. I'm not saying I love Aaron Rodgers and all he stands for. No, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, it is a football award. It is not a personality award. So there you go. That's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, and Tony, the same question to you. And I mean, look what how they treated Barry Bonds. Barry Bonds. Come on now. The dude could have won an MVP every year of most of his career, But what's your thoughts on who wins and the writer deciding he won't vote for him because he doesn't like Aaron Rodgers?
Chicago Tribune writer Hub Arkish is the guy's name. Now last I checked, didn't Rodgers say he owns Chicago?
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
He sure did.
I
there you go. Well,
Yeah.
there you go. There you go. Me personally, if I had a vote, I'd kind of vote for Burrow because I don't think the Bengals make the play. I mean, if you go by that, because everybody defines the MVP differently. Now, if you go by analytics, if you go by whatever, you could say Burrow only because the Bengals are probably what? It's another Bengals season, if not for Burrow, although Mixon was great this year as well, and Chase. But I say all that, Rodgers is probably going to get it. And, it just looks, the guy in Chicago just looks disingenuous when he came out the way he said it. It looks incredibly petty. And look,
then he also apologized too.
Yeah,
by the
he
way.
came back.
Sure, which is
but he really doesn't mean that
about
either.
as sincere, which is about as sincere as a handshake from Donald Trump. But that's another story in and of. Look, Aaron Rodgers is a 24-karat butthole. We all know that. But again, like Mike said, it's a performance award. And someone tell Bruce Arians to take several seats because he's basically saying that if Brady doesn't get it, it doesn't exist. Well, then it doesn't exist. Then, as far as I'm concerned,
right? It's the never ending story with the pink dragon flying in the sky. Then Bruce.
Exactly.
I wouldn't give it to Burrow because they had the same team last year. Chase comes in, and then I know he got hurt and all that. I just think Chase makes a big difference for him more so. But yeah, listen. This reporter saying what he says. These reporters, they shouldn't even have. I never thought any of these reporters should have a vote anyway. They should come up with some kind of players committee, and because those are the guys.
You can't do that.
I mean,
you can't do that.
No. Listen. I'm not saying current play. Wait a minute. I'm not saying current players. I'm saying former players who played the game, who can look at this objectively and say, "Hey, this is the MVP of the league." Not current players.
How about this, guys? We all know the NFL Network. They do that. The 100 top players in the league every year. Hell, they pretty much get it right. I think they've gotten, when they've done it year by year by year, I think for the most part, it parallels. Why not have those guys vote for the MVP? I mean, look, there's going to be pettiness and whatever either way, but I'm going to listen to a guy in the trenches as opposed to somebody that's, whatever.
Yeah, that played frisbee their whole career, their whole life.
I got an idea. Why don't you break it down to percentages? Break it down to percentages of how actually the votes count. The writers can still have their vote, but it's just not going to count for a huge percentage of it.
Exactly. Yeah,
cut it down to stuff like that.
I think for any awards, you always have to have a player's input because they've been and look. There's media biases. We've seen in the NBA where guys don't vote for a guy because they, they find out that the guy gets a raise, like a $100,000 bonus if he wins MVP, so they won't vote for him. Right. And then you had that mental midget Bill Simmons a few years ago, touting LeBron because he was going to make a couple of bucks if LeBron had won MVP. So it's you gotta, there's got to be a different balance. There has to be a balance where you get the players' input and the media's input. But like Mike said, I would maybe make it like a 55-45 players and media.
Yeah. Real quick. Offensive player of the year, mine is Chase. Defense. Parsons in Dallas. Defensive player. Listen, if Watt doesn't win it in Pittsburgh after Ty and Strahan, he'll never win it. Sure. Listen, like I told my son, Aaron Donald is a freak of nature. The play interior, get double teamed and still get sacks. He's a bad dude. I mean, let's just. He's always
trains with knives. He trains with knives. I know he seriously
Yeah, he
trains the
does.
knives. I'm like, man, that's crazy.
So
Yeah.
who's your?
I want any parts of that guy.
Hey, can we throw some honorable mention for Crosby out in Vegas as well?
Oh yeah,
I'll say that. Yeah. I like his story.
Win it, but I just think he needs to be in the conversation.
But
I like his story.
And Hendrickson with Cincinnati, how
yes, definitely.
I mean, how they got them from the Saints and free like that. That's the
Saints had no money. That's why.
Right, but I'm saying that's the steal of the free agency for me for Cincinnati. But Mike, defensive player of the year, offense, and defensive rookie of the year. Your thoughts?
All right, offensive player of the year. I mean, I hate to say it, even though he didn't win to go to the playoffs, but Jonathan Taylor was just too amazing for the Colts for me to not give him any awards. As far as defensive player of the year, I mean, honestly, if it doesn't go to Watt, it's going to go to Michael Parsons, and he's going to win the rookie and defensive player of the year at the same time. If it's going to be one of those two, but in my opinion, I mean, I think Watt played great. I mean, to get those amount of sacks and not play in all the games,
yeah, he missed 2 games.
That's amazing. But but more than likely, do I think him winning it? It's going to be. I'm about 60-40 on him winning it. In all actuality, I think Michael Parsons might mess around and win it. He actually might mess around and win it.
And you're saying Chase is your offensive rookie of the year? Hands
down?
Oh
yeah, definitely by far. All
right, Tony, yours defensive player of the year. The offensive. I love Jonathan Taylor. I would have said he would have been in my MVP, like Mike said, if they had made the playoffs. Yeah, right. And then your rookies, offense and defense.
Taylor, offensive player of the year. Watt's got to be your defensive player of the year. I mean, Parsons had a great year too. I'll give Parsons defensive rookie of the year, and Chase. I mean, Ray Charles and Jose Feliciano called and said that they have to vote for them for offensive rookie of the year.
It just simply I mean. You got to deal with Cincinnati. Only thing with them is they better shore up that offensive line. I'm sure they will. Since he's under rookie contract, they could probably spend some money on that offensive line because you can't let him get pounded. He's got to have time to throw the ball. You're Cincinnati. One last NFL question. Baker Mayfield, they got a year left, right? So he'll be back unless they trade or whatever, by default. But this guy is not. Listen, I'm not saying he's not an NFL quarterback, but that lineup that they have with all those Pro Bowlers and everybody on both sides, the defense didn't play as well as I thought they would. You have got to make sure you shore up that quarterback position. He is not the guy, and Stefani is just as much to blame because the only guy to stop Nick Chubb was the head coach. You run. Why are you not?
This was the equivalent of who's the only guy that can hold Michael Jordan under 20 points? Dean Smith.
Right. Yeah. That's a great point, Tony. But Mike, I mean, Baker is not the guy if they're going to allow him to be this quarterback that he really isn't. Run the football, then play action. I think they do got to get a stretch receiver because Landry's a good receiver, but he's not going to deep out go down the field. So they probably need to get a deep down the field receiver. But other
they had one.
Yeah, exactly. They did, but hey, Baker wasn't getting on the ball, so he's receivers are divas. So hey, give me the ball or I'm out. So they got to replace.
She was looking good in LA.
Yeah. So what say you about Baker and that situation in Cleveland?
Well, the thing is with Baker, he has to have throwing lanes. Biggest thing there is go back to the running game, get Kareem Hunt back healthy, get Nick Chubb back healthy, run the football, play action. Honestly, they have to make an option. They picked up an option on him for almost $19 million. Do I think he's a $19 million quarterback? No, nope. I do not think he is a $19 million quarterback. And honestly, I think this might be his last season there. Potentially, he could not be there next year. There's always that potential. Right. And honestly, I heard somebody talk about One of my buddies in the podcasting game, Mark Gunnels. He has a podcast called Mark My Words out of LA. He actually talked about him potentially going to the Redskins as an option. Just the Redskins have nobody. But just a thought, but honestly, I think this experiment has to end unless you go back to making the running game your focus and making Baker be the guy that throws the ball off play action and things like that, because he cannot stand in the pocket and throw it over people because he is 5'10". Did you not see that one play where he threw the ball down the field? I know his shoulders messed up and those things. I know those things are going on. But he threw the ball downfield to Jarvis Landry. Like Jarvis Landry was 6'8".
Right.
Missed the pass, threw it right to the defensive back. And he couldn't see who he was throwing it to. So either you're going to create throwing lanes for him or you're going to use play action to make things easier on him. One of the two have to happen. But in the end, I think Baker, just does a little bit too much to kind of be, he has me iffy on him. I don't see him being the franchise guy unless they strategically change the offense back to the focal point of the running game.
And Tony, to his point, that's on the coach. If you're not gonna, the one thing that Seattle's done and Russell's done is he rolls out. He's a short quarterback, but he can roll out and make plays and stuff. They're not doing that with Baker. You can't have him in the pocket at 5'10". How many passes got in the last Steelers game? He got knocked down because he's right under center inside the pocket, and you can't see over. They just jumping up and knocking him down. So what do you think about Baker and that situation in Cleveland?
He makes good commercials.
Yeah, the progressive commercials are funny, by the way.
Yeah. Look, at this point right now, he is a personality that happens to be quarterback for the Browns. That's the nicest way. That's the nicest way you can really say it right now.
Right.
And when you consider they've gone through 189 quarterbacks since the coming back in 99, he may just wind up being just another. Right now he's no better or worse than like a Spurgeon Wynn or a Jeff Garcia or a Johnny Manziel or God, how many of them have they gone through since
Eric Anderson?
Oh man, it's the only distinction between him and the kid who took him to the playoffs, I guess God, I can't remember his name, but right now they're really no better than they were a couple years ago. And remember, people had the audacity to call them a Super Bowl contender going into this year. And I was like, whoa.
I actually drank the Kool-Aid. I can't even. Yeah, I did drink the Kool-Aid.
I mean, because
only because of the running game. Because I think all of us appreciate the running game, but see, a lot of that
and their defense too. T. Denzel, the defense. They got some studs on the other side too. So that's why people drunk the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, the problem with the biggest problem I have with the NFL is everybody wants to throw, and you can't throw 40, 50 times a game. It's all you got to do. You don't have to do overly analytic with it. Teams that win the Super Bowl or teams that contend for a Super Bowl can run the ball and stop the run. One of the reasons why those giant teams in the 90s and early 2000s were always in the mix was because they could run the ball and they could stop the run. And all these cold weather teams that still want to throw the ball 40, 50 times a game, and then when they go, have to go play in the cold weather, have to go play somewhere else, it doesn't fly. Now, Philly's got a shooter's chance in the sense because they're committed to the run. The team you watch, the teams that are committed to the run that are in the playoffs and can play presentable defense will make a run.
Right. And real quick, I was listening to the post game after the Steelers, and one of the callers just said, well, you got Derek Watt as a fullback. Why don't they use him on third and short and stuff? And the announcer, and Charlie Batch was on the one of the guys on the post game, said they don't use fullbacks. I mean, he's overpaid. He's on the team because of his brother. He's making $3 million. He's good on special teams, but he's designated as his position is a fullback, but they don't use him in the running game. To your point about how it's a pass league now, and they don't want to double down and go, two backs in the backfield type thing. If anything, they'll go running back, tight end, or something like that in the backfield. Look how they use Debo with the 49ers. He's a wide receiver, a stud, physical wide receiver, but they're playing him. So this whole fullback thing is gone. Like it's the 49ers probably the only ones that kind of use that.
They use him for sure.
Right, and the Ravens will do it too, in a sense. But other than that, that's it. It's a thing of the past. It's a past.
I feel like the old guy in the barbershop sometimes because
you're right. I'm like ground and pound.
Yeah, that doesn't look. That's never look. It's never changed in the NFL, and now the league is a copycat league. When Joe Gibbs won with the Diesel, everybody then all of a sudden everybody had the one back. And then when you had the quote unquote West Coast offense, then everybody whatever. But there's got to be a balance. One of the reasons why the Colts were cool to watch was because Taylor just took it to an entire other level. Now, unfortunately, their Achilles heel was number 2. But the thing is, if you've got there is still room for having that dominant running back. I mean, why are we even talking about the Titans because of King Henry?
I mean, that dude, and he's nobody that big should be able to run that fast and be that powerful.
Oh yeah, look, the only guy that reminds
me. Yeah, the only guy that reminds me of him, and I'm not trying to be biased, is 22 with Pittsburgh. Like he's got that stiff arm, and he's a big kid, not as big as Henry, but nobody that big should be that strong and that fast. And
that commercial with him dragging people through the luggage carrier, that doesn't do him justice. It doesn't do him justice at all. That's just a touch of what he's been able to. I mean, to me, he's in that. I know,
Earl Campbell,
Chuck Munty, Jim Brown, William Andrew. I mean, those guys where you literally just, give me the ball.
What do you do with a dude like that? And he's a great blocker, Mike, as you know. If the blitz is coming, they keep him in. He's a good blocker too, as well.
I would put him in the mold of a guy that would be like a Jim Brown, but you also would put him in the mold of an Eric Dickerson when he gets in the open field.
Absolutely.
That's what I would put him in.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm talking about. To be that powerful, but then be elusive. To be able to cut.
I'll say this: he's not quite as elusive. The one thing that the Titans did with him that nobody talks about, he used to be a dancer when he was in the backfield. But what he does now, he hits one cut and he's in there. And he's going to give you one move. He's not going to try to shake you. He's just going to either plow through you or he's going to, give you one cut.
No, but I think you sell him short with his vision. Because
No, I'm not selling him short with his vision.
If that stretch is going to the right, he's got that vision to get to the hole to the left. He's in that sense, he's elusive. Like he can his feet and his power, we haven't seen that. I still say I think you're both right. I think he's an Earl Campbell, Eric Dickerson type of player. Like he could, when he gets in the open, you see that speed and he's chucking it down the field, but he'll just knock guys out. I hated Earl Campbell. I respect that Pittsburgh would had 5 guys on him. He just boom, 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 and keep going.
Look, Josh Norman and his family have never been the same since that hit a couple years ago. I mean that's
hasn't.
That's whew.
He got Earl Thomas out the league when he spun him around like a top. Remember that?
Yes.
Earl Thomas never played for Baltimore Ravens again after that.
Oh my God!
He's still trying to find his head in his helmet, for Christ's sake.
Right.
Nah, he's still trying. He's still trying to not be on the next episode of Cheaters. That's what he's trying not to do. Yeah.
That's a whole other story.
Real quick, because I know we're running out of time, so I want to get a couple of other things in. Antonio Brown plays again. You think in the NFL?
Oh boy.
And Mike, really briefly, I'm torn because he obviously something's going on with him. I don't like to use word mental than things, but something's going on. But at the same time, if you're not deemed,
there's an accountability factor there too. And
exactly. Well, Mike,
right.
when you look at it, it's three parts of this. It's an accountability. Certainly, he's got to get some help. Something's going on. But the NFL is, if the dude can ball, somebody might pick him up. So does he play again in the NFL?
Honestly, I don't know. I've said before that he's not going to play again. I said it a couple different times in terms of things that he has done, and then all of a sudden, what happens? Somebody signs. So, to me, this is the one thing that I need people to understand. You can need help, and you can also be deemed selfish or be held accountable as well. Those things are not mutually exclusive. You can be both of those at the same time.
Right.
And to be honest, he's being pretty reckless, a little bit reckless and irresponsible, because the thing is, he's going on these podcasts, talking about this, talking about that, talking about, he's got to understand, how are people going to trust him in the locker room when he's doing this? So, I honestly have doubts that he does play again. I mean, honestly, he's in his mid-30s at this point.
30, early, about 34, I think he is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's about over. That sun's about to set, and I guess he can go on to trying to rival Joe Budden as one of the most controversial podcasters.
And T, Chad Okocinco found out, that behavior, will get him. But I thought, they tried to throw T.O. in it, and T.O. was just misunderstood. So he ain't in the same conversation.
Yeah, and to be fair, even Ochocinco, Ochocinco was just a goofball. I mean, he's
right.
It wasn't anything. There wasn't
I'm saying
malicious. There wasn't anything really malicious there. Look,
no, but I'm just saying that real quick. But I'm just saying, with Ochocinco, he goofballed his way out of the league.
Sure.
But
there was one incident there too in Miami.
And listen, T, if I hear another coach after the fact say, I pray for him, I hope they get the kid. Bruce Arians, I didn't like him in Pittsburgh anyway. Yeah. But if I hear another coach saying, well, we hope he gets help after the fact, but meanwhile, you brought him back. You knew he was who he was, and you brought him back anyway. And listen, if Tom Brady can't help this dude, he's the face of the league and all this other stuff. If he can't help Brown stay on the field and stay out of trouble and all that kind of stuff, I don't think anybody could.
He actually had him staying in his house, and then he just spits in his face about it.
Yeah,
I just don't understand that
one. I'll be the bad guy. I do think the Burfict hit was a turning point in his career, because now, granted, he did some crazy stuff before then, but it's been amped up even more. I don't think it's all the CTE. Is it a factor? Yes, I think it's definitely a factor in this. But again, I go back to what Mike said. There has to be some accountability, because the guy's been in the league for a while now. Right. I could see if he was only, say, a 4 or 5 year guy, but he's been in the league for a while now. And you're absolutely right, because, excuse me, LA, everybody knows what's going on here. Players and coaches talk. Everybody knows what's going on here. So you can't, you literally can't cry ignorance when you bring him in. So Arians, there's a phoniness to Arians as well. That's another story for another day. But having said all that, would it surprise me if he's in camp with somebody in July? No.
I'm with you. And Tony, you make a great point. He has that puncher's drunk slur in his I mean, he's always kind of had a roughness about his dialect, if you
Well,
will.
it's just
But now he
it's
sounds like he's slurring. It's like that hit, just kind of that CTE might be a part of what's going on.
well, see, the thing is, it's not, the crazy thing, and again, I'm not a doctor or what have you, but I remember a player years ago told me, it's different now in the sense of when kids play pee-wee ball, so you develop hits through that. You play high school ball, there's 4 years of hits for that. You play college ball, there's 4 years of that. Now, he's done at least 10 years in the NFL now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a cumulative. It's this maybe, but it's sort of like Ali, in the sense of it may not all happen in one instance, but the cumulative effect. And I think that's what happens with a lot of these guys. And see, this is where the accountability of the NFL comes in, because it's so easy to just toss him to the side and just say he's a problem. But there are a lot of other players who don't have the same temperament as Antonio Brown and are suffering in silence.
Yeah, and they need to do a lot more. You know what they did with Junior Seau and his brain, and he wanted them to check. They need to do that research, but we know the NFL is not going to do that.
Well, see, the sad thing is they can't do it until they pass on. It's right. It's almost.
But they can do more studies, real studies.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And Mike, you got your we have kids, and my son wanted to play football. I supported them, and they made it to the Pee Wee champion, went down to ESPN and played in the Pee Wee, Super Bowl and all that. But I really wanted him to play basketball or baseball. I really, I played football, but I really didn't want him to play football because of the way, the hits are now, and the way, there's no real studies and different things, and his brain being, a 15-year-old brain, like it, that's a little bit different. So I digress. Real quick, Mike, you talked about, and I think Tony said 100 players in terms of how we look at the MVP. One player that was not in the 75 in the NBA was a gentleman who came back to Golden State as one of the Splash Brothers, and he looked pretty good. I wasn't surprised. I think the defensive side with him in Clay it may be the way where he'll have to get better at. But I mean, I think he had 17 points in the game or whatever it was in the game.
17 points on 18 shots.
And 18 shots. And I've been saying all year, as good as you look at this team, and as good as arguably the best player in the game, at least for that team, especially, is he hasn't looked that good this year. And I think because the pressure was on him to perform at the highest level. Now you get Clay back. I think it takes off the pressure. So with Clay coming back, so I thought they would be they're the favorites anyway. Where they're playing and their depth and all that, they would be the favorites if nothing else in the West. But with Clay coming back, are they clearly the best team in the West and or the NBA?
Well, I'm gonna throw you off a little bit.
Okay.
I'm gonna say they are the best regular season team in the NBA. Now, people can take that how they want, but I think they're the best regular season team in the NBA right now. I'm gonna leave it at that. Because you look at the players they have, you have a lot of depth on that team with the young guys and Kuminga and Poole coming in off the bench. You've got Wiggins playing out of his mind right now. You got Draymond Green pass the ball like hot potato, but not gonna shoot. And you got Looney playing his role at center. And you got a really deep team there. So, in that aspect, they're the best regular season team in basketball right now.
The Lakers, listen, this team,
They'll be
not going to
fine,
win it.
man.
I didn't think that, but listen, I didn't think they'd win the championship anyway. Now, do they even make the playoffs? I mean, you can't keep beating up on Sacramento and Minnesota and teams like that.
The thing is with that team, I mean, as bad as they played so far, you also got to remember they're in the fifth spot in the West. So, I mean, honestly, and they're doing all this without even Anthony Davis being out there. They're playing small ball with LeBron at center. So, I mean, honestly, I think the Lakers will be fine. I mean, the thing about them to watch for them to do is make a move right after the All-Star break. Not make a move in terms of a trade, make a move in terms of up the standings. Because honestly, I think LeBron's doing his thing. He just needs, and I think Westbrook, as much as people want to get on him and talk about him and things like that, he's still trying to figure out his role on that team. Sure, he does make some mistakes and things like that, but you can never count out the effort he's going to give you on both ends of the court. So, I think when Anthony Davis comes back, which I mean, looking at him, he was actually shooting what couple days, what is it, a day or two ago, I think. He was actually shooting on the court with a nice size brace on his knee. So I think he'll be back. I'd probably say about 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. He'll be back. When he comes back, I'll look for the Lakers to make a move up the standings. And also another key guy coming in off the bench, Kendrick Nunn. When he gets out there, that makes their bench even stronger because he's a guy that can score and he's got length too. He's about 6'3". Honestly, as much as people, I'm kind of loving it. I'm not even a Lakers fan, and I'm kind of loving it that people are counting out this team and talking about they're old and things like that. Like the Chicago Bulls didn't win championships when they were the oldest team in the NBA. That's what it cracks me up. It cracks me up. It cracks me up every time I hear it.
Is Kyrie coming back? Even in the limited way it is, and it's going to be interesting if COVID rules change in the playoffs. But him coming back, is Brooklyn the team to beat in the East?
Not with him being part-time. The reason why I say that is because, it's nothing against Kyrie, but the thing is, it's hard to build chemistry with somebody that's in and out the lineup. And you have them one game, you play great, and then you look at the next game they played, they got beat. And they got beat by a team they shouldn't have got beat by. So, honestly, it's not going to be a big boost for them until he's on the court full time.
And Milwaukee is the team still. They're the defending champions.
Milwaukee and Chicago. They're right there.
Levine and those guys in Chicago, you're right. I said it. Go back. Folks, listen. I said, do not sleep on the Bulls. The Bulls are going to be very good this year. And certainly they are. Final question. National championship game. At the time of this broadcast, of course, who wins?
Honestly, I want to say Georgia, but I'm going to say Alabama. I mean, Alabama's offense is explosive. I'm not sure Georgia gets enough going offensively with Stetson Bennett or whatever his name is at quarterback. I'm not sold on him. I think Georgia's defense plays better this game, but I just don't think they have enough to win.
Yeah, it's he has that Baker Mayfield mentality, like he thinks he's greater than he really is, but Bennett can't. No, I mean Alabama's got issues. But
there is a rumor going around right now about Georgia, by the way,
as far as
that a particular quarterback in the transfer portal could be coming.
Oh,
no quarterback I'm talking about?
Oh, from don't tell me, from Oklahoma.
Yeah. There's a rumor that he could potentially
Caleb,
be landing Caleb Williams. Now, if he comes to Georgia, all heck is going to break loose.
Oh, yeah. And
that's all they're missing. That's literally all they're missing.
Yep. Again, the Cleveland effect.
And they got a running back. They got a running back from this area that's going down there too. Actually, from Middle Tennessee area, that's actually going down to Georgia to play.
Wow. So I'm still not sold on Kirby, but
we know Kirby is Kirby. Kirby's going Kirby.
Yeah, Kirby's no Nick. But we'll see. Listen, I appreciate you being on. As long as you have, you can push, your podcast before you get out of here, sir.
All right. Well, podcast is on once a week. It's touring the AFC South. I have, of course, host on there, break down the AFC, and then I also hit you up with my early hits, talking about just the NFL or sports world in general. Of course, you can find me, of course, writing for, of course, the Nashville Voice or any other places. Of course, I'm a freelance journalist, so I could be anywhere. Also, uh, of course, you can find me on Twitter at MikePatton82. That's MikePatton 82. And also, hey man, where's CeeLo Green go, man? I was gonna ask him for a song tonight.
Who? T
I was
Mac.
gonna ask. Yeah, I was gonna ask CeeLo Green what was he gonna sing for us tonight.
Oh.
Man.
Mike, you are the best, man. I appreciate you staying on as long as you have, man. Thank you so much, man. Enjoy your evening, and you and your family enjoy.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Mike Patton, always good to have him on. If you missed any part of our broadcast, you can hear the audio version at thebatchelornews.airtime.pro, the Batchelor with a T, news.airtime.pro. Follow us on Facebook at Pad Nation, Pad Nation 2 at Twitter. You can watch the show and follow us on YouTube. Please do on YouTube. And you can watch the show on Fire Stick or Roku at Big Mind Entertainment, that channel. You'll see the Batchelor News radio show there. Enjoy. We'll talk with you soon.